On Christmas Eve, 1945, a tragic fire destroyed the Sodder family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia. The fire broke out late at night, and by the time the fire trucks arrived, the house had already been engulfed in flames. 5 of the 10 Sodder children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, were missing and presumed dead. But what made this case truly terrifying was what happened after the fire was put out. The parents, George and Jenny Sodder, stood in the yard, watching the destruction of their home. The fire had been intense, but there was something odd about the aftermath. Despite the complete destruction of the house, no remains of the children were found in the wreckage. No bones, no bodies, not even traces of clothing. This raised suspicions for George and Jenny. How could 5 children simply vanish in a fire without leaving a single trace behind? And why was there no evidence of the children inside the house when it burnt down? Before the fire, the Sodder family had experienced some odd events. For weeks leading up to Christmas, the family had received mysterious phone calls. Someone would hang up right after George or Jenny picked up. One of the children reported seeing a car parked in front of the house the night before the fire, with several men sitting inside, watching the house. Then, on the night of the fire, there were even more strange details. George had tried to start the family's backup generator, but it wouldn't work. He later found that the wires had been cut, and there were reports that the telephone lines had been mysteriously cut as well, preventing the family from calling for help. But the most chilling thing was that, despite the fire raging through the house, the ladder that the family used to access the second floor was missing. It was later discovered, when the fire had burned itself out, that the ladder had been deliberately moved away from the house. In the days and weeks after the fire, George and Jenny refused to believe that their children had perished in the flames. They believed that someone had kidnapped them and set the fire to cover it up. They spent years searching for clues and following up on leads. One of the most disturbing pieces of evidence came years later. In 1947, a photo arrived in the mail. It was a photograph of a young man who looked strikingly similar to one of the missing Sodder children, Louis. The photo had been taken in a foreign country, and the handwriting on the back of the photo read, "Louis Sodder, I love you." George and Jenny were convinced it was their son, still alive and held captive. The Sodders even hired a private investigator, but the leads dried up. Over the years, they received more strange tips and reports of sightings of the children, but none of them ever panned out. Despite extensive investigations, the fate of the Sodder children remains a mystery. The local fire department declared the cause of the fire to be faulty wiring, but George and Jenny remained convinced that the fire had been deliberately set. They even started to believe that someone in the community had been involved, and that the fire was a form of retaliation for some unknown reason. The Sodders spent years trying to get answers, even raising a billboard with a photo of their children and offering a reward for any information. But no one ever came forward with concrete answers, and the case remains unsolved to this day. What happened to the Sodder children? Were they kidnapped? Did they somehow survive the fire and live on in hiding? Or was there some other dark and unexplained force behind their disappearance? Some people believe that the children may have escaped the fire, but were unable to get out of town because of the damage to the roads or nearby hills. Others speculate that someone with a vendetta against the family may have been involved in setting the fire as a cover-up for a kidnapping. What is certain is that the tragedy of the Sodder children remains one of the most unsettling and unsolved mysteries in American history. The parents, George and Jenny, never gave up hope. They continued to search for their children until they died, still clinging to the hope that their children were out there, somewhere alive. To this day, no one knows what really happened that night or where the children went. But the strange circumstances surrounding their disappearance have made it a chilling story that has never fully gone away.